These homes over here, some reduction in water surface elevations, taking out this gravel here and lowering the channel by 3 feet there. As the floods get bigger, similar to the gravel skimming, as you get larger and larger floods, that gravel that you pulled out becomes less and less meaningful. So we see some reduction in the larger floods, but less so, 0.2 to 0.6 feet. Another thing we know, that if you dig out that gravel, at the next bankful event or the next moderately sized flood, the gravel comes back again. Because you've carved out, you've created a big hole, and the gravel comes back. So this is something that would require repetition. Repeat dredging. It also leads to unstable channel conditions because you're transitioning from the area upstream of where you've dredged and downstream. You're transitioning steeply into this area. And that could lead to head cutting, it could lead to additional aggradation of sediment. But we did see flood reduction as a result of this. So we're going to come back to this and do the benefit cost analysis once I'm done running through our alternatives. We looked at the Main Street Bridge over Stony Clove. We knew we weren't going to replace this bridge. To replace it with a larger, higher structure would be very costly because it has to tie into the existing grades there. We looked at modifications to the bridge. We tried a thinner deck. We tried different wing walls that would help force the flows through the bridge. And we looked at, as I said, raising the bridge, but it required pretty extensive raising of the intersection and changing to the whole setup of the intersection there. So we didn't recommend any further analysis there. So I talked about, these are the alternatives I discussed for Phoenicia. Some of them we've rolled out, and others we wanted to examine more closely. The replacement of the Bridge Street Bridge in combination with the floodplain enhancement. The Bridge Street Bridge alone wasn't going to do it, but the two combined seem to have some merit. And then the dredging of the channel. And I'll talk about those a bit more in the benefit cost analysis.
Do you want me to hold the question, or can I ask you?
Sure, you can ask the question.
I'm just wondering why there was no exploration of any type of dredging or remodeling of the channel bed on Stony Clove. Because that was one of the short-term steps that was taken after Irene.
Yeah.
And it seems we haven't had any flooding on Main Street since then. I realize there are a lot of areas,
Yeah.
but just wondered, it doesn't even seem like it was even looked at, so I'm curious about.
Well, I know we were involved in the work at the Main Street Bridge there, and there was sort of in addition to some configuration of the channel that was designed, there was also a recommendation and a strategy put forth to clean that out periodically, just because of the way it was aligned. So we didn't re-examine it here, and that's really it. Because that's the only, from my understanding, that's the only location where the sediment really accumulates, right at the bridge there on Stony Clove. So we didn't evaluate it further up.
So where does that leave us? Is that something that's going to be done periodically or never done again? Clearing that out.
So unfortunately, nobody from the Ulster County Soil and Water District could be here tonight. They are monitoring that, the cross sections, the river through there, to see how it responds to different floods. We haven't had, as you know, much of a flood since that project was done, since Irene. And so we don't know how it'll do when more water and sediment move. But so far, it's maintaining its cross section without accumulating sediment. So it looks like the structures that were put in there to increase the velocity of water and keep sediment moving under that bridge are working at least at these lower flow levels. And we'll see how it does the larger flow levels. And hopefully it'll keep flushing the sediment through there. If we get another really big storm, there might need to be some sediment removal again.
Thank you, that's very helpful. One of the things you're doing is looking at funding sources for different strategies. If this turns out, if we have another flood, this turns out to be a successful modification that's worth doing once in a while, there'll be a cost involved doing it once in a while. Are you going to be looking at how, if it turns out to be a positive thing that's worthy of continuing, how we will pay for doing that?
Well, I mean, as Leslie said, locations like that, I mean, we have to watch them closely and see if it's something that's going to work. I mean, it's that's sort of an adaptive strategy where we have to look at it. It's not something we can model exactly and say that's going to flush through all the sediment every time, and or it's going to require some work.
I guess I'm just wondering if, in fact, it looks positive. And I realize you can't know that at this point. If it looks like a positive thing, will any work be done to identify funding sources to use that strategy if it turns out it looks favorable?
I mean, I would imagine, I don't know, maybe Eric or Rob could tell me, but I would imagine that sort of thing would be sort of a town forces type of thing if it was decided that it was a good idea. I mean, I haven't identified funding for that specific activity here, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when we did that work, just around Irene, we were actually battling with the DEC about the merits of it. If it wasn't for Irene, I still, to this day, we don't know if we would have gotten the permits to go ahead and do that project, other than the commissioner coming into the firehouse and saying, give them whatever permits they need. We thought we had vetted it very fully, think that it shows promise, but again, as Mark and Leslie have said, until it proves itself worthy, there's going to be no opportunity there. DEC is watching it closely as well. If it does prove to have merit, then certainly. Again, one of the things we talked about talking on the Esopus is possibly putting structures in to help get gravel migration through the Esopus past the Bridge Street Bridge, so at least it doesn't accumulate there anymore. But the other problem with the Stony Clove is you have a very shallow slope on that, so the water tends to slow and drop all the media that it's carrying when it does that. Eric can attest that when they were digging, they stopped basically where we stopped because he was excavating the gravel and he was getting clay bank. So when he hit clay, that's basically saying this hasn't been dug before, and you need to keep some cobble there to protect it so you don't get that Yoo-hoo milk stream running down all the time. So but we'll be monitoring it for the next couple of years, for sure.
And the other issue is the bridge on Main Street. It can only handle, what, a 50-year, 60-year flood or something like that? Something.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah,
very
not a lot
unusual.
of flood, right. All right, I'm going to go through the benefit cost analysis results here. And basically what we're doing with the benefit cost analysis, just to put it simply, we're coming up with a benefit cost ratio. We're looking at the benefits from the reduction in flooding, and we're comparing that to the cost of implementing it. And we look at it over a 50-year time period. So what are the benefits of not being flooded, or the flood reduction carried forward over 50 years versus the costs? And these are some of the assumptions we made as we went into this benefit cost analysis. In terms of a dredge scenario, about $10 a cubic yard to remove the sediment, and another $10 a cubic yard for associated costs, permits, gaining access, water control, and that it would need to be repeated 5 times over a 50-year time period. And there's possibly some cost savings if the material can be used locally. I wanted to note that. And then the benefits are derived from the reduction in flooding that we see from the reduction in water surface elevations. The floodplain enhancement scenario, when I talk about that, there are costs associated with relocating homes or businesses, and then based on this excavation of floodplain, there's a certain cost associated with constructing that, to export material, to clear the area for design and permitting. But then there's benefits, reduced flooding from the homes that are no longer going to be flooded because they've been relocated, and also benefits due to reduction of flooding at the structures that remain. I mentioned the open space riparian area benefit. If we create an open space along the river that's normally dry, when it's not being flooded, people could walk and recreate there, and there's some added benefit to that. So I'm just going to run through these quickly for each of the scenarios that we looked at. This is for enhancement of the floodplain and the reduction of Bridge Street, when we look at this over 50 years and the likelihood of the different magnitude floods occurring, we see that there's benefits from moving those homes out of the floodplain, those homes that would have to be relocated. The fact that those homes aren't going to be flooded and aren't going to need repairs amounts to almost $7 million in benefits. And then the benefits resulting from that reduction of flooding on Main Street, even though we're not completely eliminating it, we're reducing the flooding. That's another $2.8 million in benefits. And then the fact that the Bridge Street Bridge has been replaced with a larger structure that spans the floodplain. It's not going to need the periodic repairs that it is now. We save another close to $500,000 there. So the total benefits are over $10 million from implementing this floodplain enhancement and replacing the Bridge Street Bridge. We look at the cost. We have the property buyouts. We look at the demolition costs and the cost of the bridge replacement and the cost of designing and building the floodplain enhancement project, and we're pretty close to $10 million. So when you look at the overall benefit cost ratio, benefits versus cost, we have a slightly positive benefit cost ratio, 1.02.
Excuse me, is that over the 50-year
It is,
period?
over the 50-year period. Yeah. And that's using the assessed values of the homes with the county equalization adjustment of 25.5%, which brings it up to today's close to the market values of the homes. And that factors into both the cost of the project for relocating properties and also the benefits when you look at the avoided damages. Now, we took a slightly different angle on the floodplain enhancement scenarios. We said, what if through some other means, the town were able to identify funding to replace the bridge with a larger structure that spanned the floodplain? And then they were to go ahead and create this floodplain enhancement project. So this is assuming that the bridge has already been replaced with a larger structure. So we've taken that cost out. And you can see it's a much more positive benefit to cost ratio because the costs have almost halved. Now we look at the dredge scenario and we look at the benefits. So there's no home relocation here. So no homes are benefiting from being moved out of the floodplain, but we do have some reduction of flooding from having lowered those water surface elevations. And the total benefits, $314,000 over that 50-year period. We look at the cost of a one-time sediment removal of that volume of sediment that I described in that reach of sediment, or that reach of channel through Phoenicia. And we assume repeating that 5 times, and we're at about $1.1 million in cost there for doing that. And here's our benefit cost ratio when you compare them. It's just under 0.3, and we note some reasons for not dredging the channel to those depths, despite seeing some flood reduction in the smaller floods. So this is a summary of the benefit cost ratios of the alternatives that we considered for Phoenicia. Now I'm going to jump, I could pause here for a few questions. I don't want to get too sidetracked here. I could jump right into Mount Tremper and run through a similar analysis that we did there. So I don't know if anybody has clarifying questions.
I think it's a short question.
Okay.
Does this deal with, if we don't replace the bridge, does this include maintenance of that bridge as it deteriorates over 50 years?
If we don't replace it. Well, what it does do, it doesn't include.
There's a cost involved in maintaining a bridge that's aging.
Well, the benefit here, oops. The benefit here is from avoided maintenance costs, but only flood-related maintenance costs. You know, the regular maintenance costs that are associated with any bridge haven't been factored in because they apply to the old bridge, they're going to apply to the new bridge.
I would just assume that a new bridge maintenance would not be as expensive as an old bridge.
That's probably true, especially given that bridge, which I know.
So therefore, it would factor in how much, if we got a new bridge, we wouldn't spend as much on maintenance as my hypothesis.
Yeah, that's true. That's not considered here. The only costs considered here are the damages avoided by having a bridge that doesn't get damaged by the floodwaters and closed. A lot of considerations go into this bridge replacement, and Aaron helped me with this. Aaron, I keep losing track of where you are. There he is. And this is looked at actual costs in the past when when the bridge has been damaged. How long has it been closed? What are the costs of repairing it, and how many days and how many miles do people have to go out of their way? These are all factored in, and that's been factored in here. So, assuming that with a bigger bridge that spans the channel, has a larger hydraulic capacity, and does not get damaged in the flood, those would be avoided over a 50-year time span.
Mark, just for clarification too, when you're talking about benefits for businesses, homeowners, and so on, you're talking about damages that could be assessed through flooding that occurs. It doesn't really address a reduction in flood insurance rate due to the reduction on the flood surface elevation being reduced.
That's right.
Which would be a benefit as well. But
That's an important point. These benefits, which are substantial, do not include, if your flooding was reduced, we were to get the maps modified to reflect this, and FEMA were to recognize that, your flood insurance rates go down. That's quite a savings, especially with what's happening with flood insurance rates. They're going up. And that's not reflected here in this analysis, but is worth noting. Another point that I think is important to point out is where the benefits are coming from. And although combined we have close to 10 million in benefits from relocating the structures, enhancing the floodplain, and replacing the bridge, most of the benefit is as a result of having gotten those structures out of there. It's not, there is a benefit to building the project, but it's not as great as the benefit from reduction in damages from simply relocating those structures out of the floodplain. That's where most of the benefit is coming from. And I think it's important to realize that breakdown of the benefits. Anything else, or should I move downstream to Mount Tremper? Back to where we were. So this is just a summary for the Phoenicia study area. And I've already talked about these, seeking consensus on implementation of the floodplain enhancement project, seeking funding for a replacement of the Bridge Street Bridge, whether it's part of that project or it comes before it. There's a number of things I didn't go into very much here, but in the reports, it talks more about floodproofing of commercial properties, and elevation of homes that are flooded periodically in Phoenicia, ensuring that first floors are elevated, 2 feet above the base flood elevation. We also make a number of recommendations in our report having to do with relocation of critical facilities and key businesses in Phoenicia. We've listed a few here: the High Street Pump Station, which is in the 100-year floodplain, town-owned parcel on Route 28, the fire district. These are all vulnerable to flooding, and we recommend to be evaluated for relocation in the report. With that, I'll get into Mount Tremper. We have a lot of alternatives to go through here. Since I've given a background on a lot of them as we went through Phoenicia, I won't spend as long on each one here. I'll try and move a little more speedily along. But we looked at similar types of scenarios: floodplain enhancement, bridge replacement, but some additional things as well. Some levee enhancement or relocation scenarios in Mount Tremper. And we looked at a couple of scenarios on the Beaver Kill. So again, removal of accumulated sediment bars. The results were very similar to what we saw in Mount Tremper in Phoenicia when we went in and took out skimmed off the sediment bar here and there. In some locations we saw a pretty good benefit, in other locations none at all. They tended to show a flood reduction in moderate or small floods. When you get to the bigger floods, it didn't make any difference, and that's what we saw. But we wanted to evaluate this more closely, the sediment removal, so we went with a more, similar to Phoenicia, we went with a more aggressive dredge scenario. And in this case, we basically lowered the channel all through this reach where you see the sediment aggradation. You see gravel bars. This is down through Mount Tremper. Here you have the Beaver Kill coming in. This is the Emerson Lodge. You're coming along 212 here and back under this Route 28 bridge. Same schematic as in Phoenicia. We deepened the channel, got rid of that sediment to a depth of 3 feet. 2-to-1 side slopes. This was for just over a mile in length, and the estimated dredge volume was close to 90,000 cubic yards, which is about 5,000 truckloads at 18 cubic yards a truck. It's a lot of material. And what we see here, I'm showing this one in profile to give you a little more illustration of what we're talking about. So these are the different floods. This is a 10-year flood. The Irene flood, what do I have here? That's the bankful flow. So that's the flood we see once every year, once every 2 years. That's the 10-year flow, and that's the 100-year flood. The red line represents, the blue line represents existing conditions. The red line represents under the dredge scenario. And you can see in the bankful flow, we see some pretty good reductions here, 1.7 feet. This is between the Route 28 bridge and the Mount Pleasant bridge there. And then going upstream, 2.6 feet and 1.1 feet in the bankful. But the trouble is, in the bankful event, nobody's getting flooded. Close, but not quite. And then the 10-year flow, we still see some reduction, but not as much. That's these green boxes. A more modest reduction, but some. We still have over a foot in this area between the bridges in Mount Tremper. And when we get to the 100-year flood, there's less reduction. There's less reduction in flooding, but we still have some. So some water surface elevation reductions here as a result of the dredging. So as in Phoenicia, we wanted to look at that with a benefit cost analysis. This is a summary of the results. So we'll carry that forward and then look at that at the benefit cost analysis. Now we looked at some levee scenarios. There's an existing levee. It's not a FEMA certified levee, and it does not prevent large floods from inundating this area. It gets overtopped. So we looked at enhancing the height of the levee through this area. In order to bring the levee up to the height of the 100-year flood at this downstream end, depending on where you are along this levee, it would have to be increased anywhere from a foot to 9.5 feet down in this lower area. It would require substantial fill being placed in the FEMA floodway, which FEMA frowns on. And then if we were to do that, increase the height of this levee here, you're taking all this water that's normally out here and you're pinching it into the channel and holding it over here. We saw a big increase in flow velocities through here. And the water comes over on this side. And we see increased flooding along Route 212 and all the properties along here, including an increase in the backwater flooding up the Beaver Kill. Despite all that, even if we increase the height of the levee where it exists along here, you still have water doing this and coming up along the downstream side of it. Another scenario we looked at was pulling the levee back. It's still in the floodway, and now it ties into the Route 28 berm here, so it isolates this area in here. But it would require the relocation of a large number of structures in this area through Mount Pleasant, Risley Road. This levee would have to be anywhere, depending on where you are, from 2.5 to 7.3 feet above the existing grade. It would still be in the FEMA floodway, so you're still seeing an increase in flood elevations out in this area as a result of having this part of the floodway closed off. And we still see an increase in flooding up the Beaver Kill and along 212 and a lot of those homes. So really what you're doing is you're protecting this area here, you have to remove all these homes here, and you're increasing flooding on this side. Then we tried pulling the levee all the way back out of the floodway. And the trouble with this scenario, now you're removing all these homes in here. You're not increasing the flooding over here, but you're creating such a small protected area as a result of having built this levee that it's just not cost effective. This would be a hugely expensive project to relocate all those homes and build the levee. And really the benefit would be a small amount of dry land that right now gets flooded in a large flood. So a levee, we've got such a wide floodway in this area, a levee scenario just wasn't going to work here. Another thing that we discussed and tried out at the safari meetings was a flood chute. And the idea here is once flows reached a certain level, a certain discharge, some of the flow would be discharged through a channel that would come on this side of the neighborhood. But the trouble is, for a certain size flood, that would probably work very well. The trouble is, when you get a large flood, this channel here is not big enough to convey all that water. And you've got water now, you've got a situation where you've, say, this neighborhood here is still populated, and you've really left them stranded on an island. And it's not something that, you know, there'd be no emergency access vehicles would be able to access that area, and you really were creating a very isolated, unsafe situation there if we were to construct that. So we looked at a variety of configurations of a levee or a flood chute, and none of them were feasible. We just had too much water flowing through that area there. So no further analysis was done with levees. Now I already explained the floodplain enhancement scenario, like we tried in Phoenicia. And we ran the same sort of scenario here in Mount Tremper in the areas shaded red. So basically, we're lowering the floodplain through this area. On the inside of the bend, where you would naturally see a floodplain, it involves removing the existing levee that's here, relocating a number of structures along Mount Pleasant Road, Risley Road, Route 28. We also excavate the floodplain on the inside of the bend over here, and because of the floodplain enhancement here, it would require removal of the old discontinued bridge here that's in the channel now, the Mount Pleasant Bridge. We also modeled that floodplain scenario with and without the replacement of the Route 28 bridge. And I'll talk about the different combinations of what we saw there. Because this bridge acts as a constriction, and I'll talk more a bit about that. Now looking at the specifics of this one, again, the red dots indicate homes that would need to be relocated in order to construct that, and there's approximately 14. There are also parcels that would be impacted but don't require the relocation of structures. This is one scenario, and it was modeled this way. Certainly there's some flexibility in terms of how exactly this would be constructed. I don't know if all these homes would have to be relocated or a subset of them. Blue is indicated, at least while the study was underway, those homes were part of the buyout program. And I think Aaron may give an update on where we stand with that. Is that right? And of course, that's something that continues to evolve. I talked about the Route 28 bridge. That's quite a constriction in the channel, and you can even see it in this photo, just the way the channel really pinches down at this location. There's just not enough room for the flood flows to pass through that space under the bridge. So we looked at several different scenarios here, and let me just take a minute to explain what all these lines mean. These lines are the 10-year flood. And what we show here is existing conditions in the 10-year flood. And then if we were to remove that Route 28 bridge and replace it with a larger structure, if we were to build that floodplain enhancement scenario, but leave the bridge in place, and then if we were to do both, replace the bridge and enhance the floodplain. And I show here what sort of water surface elevations you would see if we were to do that. This is